The fluorescent lights of the 24-hour diner flickered as Maya stirred her coffee, watching the rain streak down the windows at 11:32 p.m. Her husband, Daniel, sat across from her, his eyes scanning the nearly empty restaurant with the casual awareness that had become second nature to him. Most people wouldn't notice the way he positioned himself facing the door, or how his shoulders remained relaxed yet ready. Maya did. She'd learned to read these subtle signs over their 5 years together. "I'll be right back," she said softly, squeezing his hand before sliding out of the booth. The restroom hallway was poorly lit, separated from the main dining area by a heavy door that muffled sound. Maya pushed through, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. A hand clamped over her mouth, rough and reeking of cigarettes. Her body went rigid with terror as she was dragged backward into the men's restroom, the door swinging shut behind them. The man was large, his breath hot against her ear as he shoved her against the tiled wall. "Give me your purse," he hissed, his voice edged with desperation. "Don't scream. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Her purse, her wedding ring. But more than that, the absolute violation of being manhandled, controlled, made helpless. She could see the wild look in his eyes reflected in the grimy mirror, the tremor in his hands that suggested drugs or withdrawal. This man was unpredictable, dangerous in his instability. What he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Daniel had already noticed her absence. Back in the booth, Daniel's internal clock had been counting. Maya should have returned by now. His training kicked in automatically, that sixth sense that had kept him alive through 3 tours in places whose names he still couldn't speak aloud. He stood smoothly, leaving cash on the table, and moved toward the hallway. The heavy door to the restroom corridor was slightly ajar. Wrong. Maya was meticulous about doors. Daniel's pulse remained steady even as adrenaline sharpened his senses. He heard it then, muffled but unmistakable, Maya's voice, tight with fear, saying, "Please, just take it." Everything Daniel had learned in 12 years of specialized military training crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. The man in the restroom had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Daniel moved like smoke, silent and inevitable. The restroom door opened without a sound under his practiced touch. The scene before him, his wife pressed against the wall, a stranger's hand raised in threat, ignited something primal in his chest. But emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not yet. The attacker's attention was entirely on Maya, on the purse she held, on whatever he thought he could take from her. He never sensed Daniel's approach, never felt the presence behind him until it was far too late to matter. "Let her go." Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. The man spun, still gripping Maya's arm, his eyes widening as he took in Daniel's stance. There was something in the way Daniel stood, utterly calm and perfectly balanced, that triggered an instinctive recognition of predator and prey. "Back off, man. I've got a knife!" The attacker's voice cracked as he fumbled in his jacket pocket. Daniel didn't retreat. He didn't advance. He simply waited, his eyes locked on the man with an intensity that was almost hypnotic. "You're going to let go of my wife. You're going to leave this restroom, and you're going to walk out that diner door and never come back. I said I've got a... I know what you have." Daniel's voice remained quiet, almost gentle. "What you don't know is what I have, what I've done, what I'm capable of doing without making a sound, without leaving a mark anyone could trace." The words hung in the air like a promise and a prophecy. Maya, even in her fear, recognized the transformation in her husband. This was the Daniel she'd only glimpsed in nightmares he couldn't quite hide, the shadow of the soldier he'd been before they met. The attacker's hand trembled violently now. His eyes darted between Daniel and the door, calculating odds that were growing worse with every passing second. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "You have 3 seconds to make the right choice," Daniel continued, taking one measured step forward. "In that time, you need to understand something. I've eliminated threats in complete darkness, in absolute silence, in situations where making a single sound meant death for my entire team. This bathroom, at 11:37 p.m., with fluorescent lights and no witnesses. This is easy. Something in the attacker broke. Maybe it was Daniel's unwavering calm, or the specific terrible certainty in his words. Maybe it was the way he moved with the precision that suggested he'd done this dance before, many times, with far more dangerous partners. The man released Maya's arm and stumbled backward. I wasn't going to... Out! Daniel positioned himself between Maya and the attacker, his body a wall of protection. Now! The man fled, the door slamming behind him. Through the walls, they heard his panicked footsteps, then the distant chime of the diner's entrance bell. For a moment, neither Daniel nor Maya moved. Then she was in his arms, shaking not just from fear but from the explosive release of tension. He held her carefully, his hands gentle now. All that coiled lethality transformed back into tenderness. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe. You're safe." "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "I just had to buy time." I kept talking to him, keeping him distracted. "I knew you'd come." Daniel pulled back slightly, cupping her face in his hands. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, the stoic warrior mask cracking to reveal the terrified husband beneath. "Always. I will always come for you." The police arrived at 11:58 p.m., summoned by the diner's manager who'd witnessed the attacker's desperate exit. Maya and Daniel gave their statements, describing the attempted robbery in careful factual terms. What Daniel didn't mention, what the officers would never need to know, was exactly what he'd been trained to do in rooms like this, in situations far more complex than a frightened addict looking for cash. They drove home in silence as rain continued to fall, the city lights blurring into streams of color. At 1:17 a.m., safe in their own apartment, Maya finally spoke. "You scared him." "With just words," Daniel nodded slowly. "Sometimes the threat of violence is more powerful than violence itself. He saw something in me, Maya. Something I've spent years trying to leave behind." "But you didn't hurt him," she said, taking his hand. "You could have. I saw it in your eyes, but you chose not to." "Because that's not who I am anymore," Daniel replied, his voice rough with emotion. "That's not the man you married. I'm done being a weapon. I just needed him to believe I could be, for one more minute." Maya leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you for saving me." "Thank you," he whispered back, "for reminding me why I came home." Outside, the rain fell softly on the sleeping city, washing everything clean. And in their small apartment, two people who'd faced darkness together found their way back to the light, bound by love stronger than fear, by courage deeper than violence, by the simple, profound truth that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what we're capable of doing, but in what we choose not to do.